It's fine by me.
So, just to give you a little background, or actually, why don't I just wait till we're live and then I'll give you background. And I'm very interested in hearing about your story as well.
Oh, absolutely. I'm happy to go in any direction you like.
There we go. We are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Revolutions of Returns podcast, hosted by the Alternative Investing Club. And we're getting ready for the show right now. Bill and I just jumped on the call, so we're gonna have a few minutes of banter here, or just catching up before the show starts. So, Bill, I was going to tell you a little bit about my background since we've never met before. I was an Intel engineer for 12 years. I started the real estate club at Intel, grew it to around 1,800 people, kind of trimmed down a little bit. We're at around 1,300 people right now. And it's now public to Intel, so and renamed and rebranded to the Alternative Investing Club. And we focus on enabling I want to enable the local business and investing community. And really, the way that we're looking at doing that is through mostly private placement investments, but also focusing not only on how to invest, but also how to operate businesses. And I think that's the operating businesses is actually fairly new for our club. The club actually came to me and took a vote and told me, "Hey, Daniel, your real estate's great, but we'd like other topics." So I went, oh, okay, we will come up with other topics. So, as an alternative investing club, we talk about oil and gas, we talk about renewable solar farms, we talk about solar credits, we talk about credit litigation finance, we talk about there's a couple of funds out right now that have to do with buying percentage ownerships in sports teams. So we are just a la carte, alternative investment, meaning either investing locally or in private organizations, not on Wall Street.
That's outstanding, right? I spent most of my career. I ran public companies. I've ran private and private equity. So by far my deep experience is exactly what you're talking about. All right, we've got these resources. What are we going to go do with them? And sometimes it's investing in companies. Sometimes it's doing other things. I'm really excited to be here and looking forward to chatting with you. This is just terrific, Daniel. Thank you so much for having me on. By the way.
It's great to have you here. Let's start off first of all. Boy, there's so much to go over, and you do a great job of presenting it on your website, by the way. First of all, can you say your last name for me? Because there's a couple of ways that it could be pronounced, and I don't like to get people's names wrong.
First of all, I it's been pronounced every way known to man because it's one of those names. I go by Canady, like
Canady.
Canada, but with a Y. But here's the interesting thing: my mother was a Kennedy, my father was a Canady. I'm from the South, so I tell everybody we were just a tree with one branch, right? So somewhere they had to be connected. But yeah. So however you say it is fine. I answer it to it all.
Well, Bill Canady, welcome here. Let's start off first of all with the beginnings of your career, and then I want to go into, what you're doing now, both on a personal level, and I see you've got several books out, by the way. There's a new one coming out, Earn the Right to Grow. I just
That's
voted
right.
on the first cover on your website.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, it's exciting. Start with first a little bit about my background. I grew up off of the eastern coast of North Carolina, a little bitty farming town, and my line, which happens to be true, is I lived at the end of a dead end dirt road in a double wide trailer. Right, so my we came very modest means to say the least. My dad was kind of a handyman slash truck driver, and my mom cut hair. So I got myself off the farm by joining the Navy. And it was at the time, I think every kid that does it hates it, but it really turned out to be one of the greatest things I ever did. And I was proud to serve my country. And I got out of that, went back, got my college, met the love of my life, had a couple of kids. And, since that time, I've really been, running companies, being part of them, things like buying, selling them, and all that. And so, really, just a kind of wide variety of business experience.
Well, good, good. And now you are involved in a lot of coaching as well, or at least, I guess, advice on how to grow your company.
That's
And
right.
I think, particularly right now, a lot of small businesses that I have talked to and other types of investors feel like there's struggle going on. And I think this sort of coaching, particularly for small to medium-sized businesses, is it's sorely needed in our country. We need to have people that understand how to build businesses. And so I definitely applaud what you're doing. Can you tell me a little bit about how you're working with businesses to help them to grow and what your what your different platforms are. For instance, your PGOS.
Yeah, absolutely. So myself, my team, we ascribe ourselves to what we call the 70-20-10 way of learning. So 10% is formalized training, stuff you get out of books and things like that. The 20% is really working with others, maybe setting in classroom settings and reading books and the 70% is actually going out and doing it. And so we've set up what we do really through those three buckets. So online, we're just changing our LMS, our learning management system, to bring out more courses. But we have a selection of courses, and geez, we've got to have more than 100 hours now. Most of those courses we make available to people that we're doing work with, right? So companies and things like that. We're going to start offering those out to the general public where they can either do some subscription or buy a course or things. But it's things with the tools that we use. We find there's a lot of people, particularly small business owners or solopreneurs, who are looking to learn it themselves, right? And we want to make those available to them, just as you would any good library. And there's videos, there's PowerPoints, there's templates, and all that come with it. The second piece is that 20% where you get the coaching. You have people, you work with someone, and it's kind of like what you and I are doing. It's just talking, sometimes in person, a lot of times it's on Zoom or whatever. And in that third section, the 70%, where the big impact comes, is where you get people to come out and are involved in your company, either consultants or hiring someone to help you go and implement it. We believe strongly it takes three people to make a company successful, really anything. One's the visionary, right? Someone that knows where they're going. That's generally the CEO. It can be someone else, but typically the CEO. The second is the operators. The operators are the people who actually have to go do the work. That's your managers, things like that. And the third is the prophet, as we like to call it. That's the expert. That's the trained to trainer, someone like yourself or somebody who's going to bring in that knowledge and help people to go do it. Sometimes that might be all three in a small company, but you need those three sections covered if you're going to go help. And we're trying to provide that educational material to do it.
All right. Can you give me an example of a company that you've worked with, and can you describe what they did and how you helped them pivot?
Yeah, so there's several. So I'll just start with one that I've ran. So OTC, Industrial Technology, is a bigger company. It's not a small one. Came in with $700 million, making about 70 million. In pretty bad shape, was going in the wrong direction. Myself and the team, we came in, we deployed our process, which is think of us as a carpenter, right? We got a bag of tools. You got to figure out what you're going to go build. Are you building a house? You're building a condo, a skyscraper. So once you understand what you're going, you take those tools and apply it. Today, that business is over $1 billion and over $200 million in earnings. Took us about 3 years to get it there, right? And so that's a very typical situation that we'll do is come in, get. And that's where I'm running the business. Get command and control of it. We have a process that we go through with it. We've also helped a lot of other ones, companies like Brooks and Whittle, Clarence Technologies, and the list goes on and on with it. So it's just really what the company needs. We're trying to be there and help it with. Probably the most interesting thing I think we do is coaching, which is where we'll sit down with the CEO or the leadership team, talk about where they are, help them understand the data, and then help them go through the journey.
Okay. Well, what is your sweet size for target size of the company? Do you work with companies that are 10 and fewer employees, or is it, 100 and greater? What's your target?
Yeah, so it's kind of bifurcated. On one end, I would say there's sub $50 million companies, a lot of them $9-10 million. And a lot of times in that, it's generally an owner with a few employees, right?
Hmm.
And in that typical case, we typically work just with the owner on it. Sometimes they might have a right-hand person, as the case may be. The second one, I would say, is the larger organizations. A lot of times those are private equity where they have bought a lot of companies and put it together. They buy all those $10 million companies, they put them together, and they can't figure out what to do with them, right?
Yeah.
So those seem to be the two sizes that we are. But really, the size isn't important. What is important, the owner or the leader has recognized they've got to a point they're not sure what to do next, right? They've stretched themselves beyond their capability, which just means they just ran out of time, right? Because they're
Right.
chief cook and bottle washer all at the same time. And they're saying, all right, how do I go do this? What do I do next? And we can help people get focused really quickly. Generally, in 100 days, we can help them get command and control of the business, figure out where they're going, and help them make those bets.
All right. And so can you tell me, how did you get into this, and what was your life experience that brought you to the point where you're coaching other people?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the first thing was if anything that's unusual about me from a coaching standpoint that I've done is most coaches coaches are wonderful at, and they go get certifications and things like that. What I really bring is I've actually done it, right? So I've started companies, I've bought them, I've sold them, I've been CEO of sub $5 million companies, and I've ran business that are greater than $2 billion. So I have a uniqueness in the background of actually having my hands on the controls. I make this joke all the time about my wife and I. So we'll get in the car together. We're going to drive somewhere, and we take it. Let's say we're in Indianapolis. We're going to go to Chicago, right? There's really only one road that gets you there, and she'll sit down. She'll sitting in the front seat with me, and she'll sit down and get out her iPad and look out the same window. I've got my hands on the wheels. By the time we get there, I've dodged 20 wrecks. I've made a couple of turnoffs, had to decide we get gas. And I get there and she's like, man, this is the greatest trip ever. I'm exhausted, right? So sitting with your in the front seat side by side is not enough, right? You have to have your hands on the wheels. You have to make those investments. You have to live with those decisions. You have to get results through other. And I think that's what you get when you work with someone like me, is someone who's been there, understands it, and they'll tell you, this is what I believe, right? Now, what you should do, you have to decide, but it's really helpful for, I think, having somebody with real experience.
Now, do you work with investors in addition to business owners, or coach the business owners on how to make their companies so that they're attractive to investors? And I would, if so, I would love to hear maybe just a couple of nuggets about how can local or smaller mid-sized companies, how can they attract private investment? And in particular, if someone wants to private invest with a group, how do they do that?
Yeah, sure. So I work with anyone with it. My main job, my day job is running businesses, but I work with a private equity firm, one of the best in the world, and I'm just blessed to be part of that. But through that, you get people reach out, right? Either because they've heard
Go ahead
about
and mention
me.
them too. Feel free to mention them by name.
Absolutely. So the private equity firm I work with is called Star. It's one of the large one. I would tell you it's the premier one in the world. And we have 50 billion under assets under management, or AUM. And they are an extraordinary group, a small group of financial experts who have a long track record of getting it right. And I've been blessed to learn from them, and I doubt I've taught them anything, but they let me keep hanging around. So the typical thing I get from, I'm gonna focus a little bit more on the small investor, if that's okay. That might be
Yeah,
a little bit
yeah.
more of the typical target here, but we can talk about both. Typically what you find, if I'll get a call from someone, and they'll have a business they own, and it's a small business, and let's say it's below 20 million, many times it's below 10 million, right? And they'll say to me, one of two things: I'm having trouble, I'm not sure what to do next, or conversely, I really want to figure out how to sell this thing, right? I want to get this, and it'll generally be a target. I want to make $100 million. I want to make 10 million, whatever it is. It really doesn't matter. And what I find almost without fail is many of them have got to where they have gotten is through really hard work, a whole variety of things, everything from luck to really hard work. But the key is, what I see is, they did not start with the end in mind. They didn't start with, someday I'm going to sell this business, and I need to understand what that looks like. What they've started with is generally, this is how I want to live. This is what makes me happy. This is the amount of money I'm going to make. And then they set that business up to do that. So on average, when the market's good, I'll buy 10 companies a year, right? Sometimes 15, sometimes none, right? This year we've closed on a couple companies, and a lot of these companies are in the sub $20 million range that we buy. And they are by far, typically, not always, the most hardest, almost impossible companies to buy. And the reason is they're all wonderful business. There's a reason we want them, but the owner doesn't actually know what's going on in their business. They think they're making one thing, they're actually making money at a different level. They think their books are in a good shape. They have all this thing, but when you peel it back it's not right. Their attorney is generally their personal attorney. Their accountant, is their advisor. So their tax accountants, their advisor, CPA, and all that. These are not the people you need to do a deal, right? It's a different skill set from it. And so a very typical one. Would you like a couple of examples?
Yeah, absolutely.
So a very typical one is we were just looking at a business in Southern California. It was doing about $16 million a year, and it had products that we
top
really
line
want.
Revenue or
top
NOI?
line. Top line revenue, about $16 million a year, 16 million a year. And they told us that they were making about 3 to 4 million a year, right?
That's a good error.
yeah. So three to 4 million. I was like, all right, makes sense, because sometimes they are, right? Now they had, in this particular group, they had two product lines that we really wanted that are exclusive products. In other words, you can only have it if you have the contracts. Like, not that we're in the car, but it's like a GM dealership. You can't just go start selling GM products. You got to have a deal with General Motors, right, or Toyota, or whoever.
Yep.
So in my world, they had two that we really like. These are two of our top ones, and we really wanted. So we go in already wanting to buy the business, right? So we get there. So first thing we find out is they are not actually making $3 million. In fact, they're barely making $1 million. In some years, they lose money. The second thing is they can't close their books, right? Their finances is being done by a very wonderful person and things like that, but they're not a competent bookkeeper. They don't have a professional accounting. So they have no system in, right? So they're using QuickBooks. QuickBooks is a wonderful process, everything, but they have no ERP. They can't match their orders with it. They can't tell you what inventory they have. And the inventory they have, they can't tell you when they've actually moved it or not, right? And so you go on it. Now, the business is a wonderful business. It's a lifestyle business. They're pulling out a lot of money out of the business. So they have a very nice lifestyle, but they're pulling so much money out of the business, they're not investing anything in. And so the business is getting worse on a unit volume every year, right? Mm-hmm. So we're looking at that. And the first thing is their attorney is someone who's never done deals before. And the attorney says, well, you should be getting $30-40 million for this business, right? And so they, and we look at it, we say, well, your business is probably worth $2 to $3 million, right? Because while you have this line, and that's important, you're not actually making any money. You're in California, which is a very difficult state to do business in, right? All your employees are at the end of their career, and you have no contracts with anyone, and you have no backfill in your people, right? So, and they want to retire. So it goes on and on and on. And so I'm talking to the owner, and I'm like, you want 30 million because your lifestyle is set up that the 30 million gets you to where you want to go. But you haven't set the business up in such a way that it's anywhere remotely worth $30 million, right? That's what we see a lot. So my first advice to people is start with the end in mind. If your end is to sell the business, set the business up and professionalize it. If your business is to give it to your child or sell it to your partner, whatever it is, start with that in mind and start taking the moves before you're ready to monetize it to get it there. And these moves are well known. And whether you work with someone like me or you or someone else, most of it will honestly be kind of common sense. It's like, if you're not feeling well, go see a doctor, right? So don't just go to your neighbor who, go see a doctor. So if you can't close your books, go get an accountant. It'll help.
Track your inventory.
Track your inventory. Inventory is the most interesting one, right? So people get ready to sell their business and they'll buy a whole bunch of inventory that they don't need or want, and then they're going to sell it. they'll take. We just looked at one business. It was actually a quite a big business. So what they did was last year they eliminated all commission for their sales guys. Now, what do you think happened from that? Two things happened from that. Well, in the short run, profitability went through the roof.
Sure, absolutely.
Right, profitability really took off. In the long run, which they had taken too long to get it to us, sales start going down at such a rate. You're like, oh my God, what's that? So they gave us last year number, which is you typically give it a trailing 12 months. They did it from the beginning of the year. And we're like, wow, this looks great. Of course, at the time we don't realize. And so we give them what's called an LOI, a letter of intent. And said that if this is all true, we'll pay you this amount. We get this year's data, and it's like it's falling off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And we start digging into it, and we find out that what they've done, a lot of really interesting things, was they had a whole bunch of inventory they don't need. They had renegotiated their contracts with their manufacturers that put them in a much worse position, and they had laid off a bunch of people and taken the salesman commission. So short-term numbers through the roof, long-term numbers be devastating.
I was just looking at a company yesterday, actually, and they sent me 2 years worth of financials. The current year's profitability was about 5x last year's, and they were looking for about a 3.5 multiple on the current year's revenues. I looked at it and basically just set it aside. I'm not going to look at a company like that.
We'll
It's
talk
interesting.
to them. Yeah, we'll talk. We've got one
there's
right
probably
now.
a lot of interesting discussions as to, why and how, and, maybe it's not a fluke. Maybe they grew their business that much, but it was enough of a red flag that they at least were deprioritized in what I was looking
For
at.
sure. It's Occam's razor. Are you familiar with that term?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep. The most
We've all
obvious
seen Contact.
That's right. So it's the most obvious is correct. Sometimes something has happened. Generally, it'll turn out to be negative. And hey, if I'm selling, I want to get my best number. And
of course.
If I was $1 million yesterday and I'm 5 today, I want it off to 5, right? Because it's for sure going to do it. But as a seller or an investor, remember, the seller always has better information.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice there to keep in mind. How do you go about identifying potential businesses that want to sell? Are they coming, are they listing in a public forum? Are they coming to your private equity firm? Are you identifying them, or are they identifying you?
There's 3 ways that we do it. So the first way is because we're a known buyer of companies, and people know that we do fair deals and everything like that, and we know what we're doing. We get what we call inbounds, right? Bankers all the time are sending us books or SIMs or SIPs, confidential. SIM is confidential information memorandum or whatever. All these cute little names they've got, but it's a packet of information. And so I will get in my inbox, 10 a month, right, of people wanting to sell. Second way is we have someone that works for us who is a known person in these industries and is very active. Is part of all, knows a lot of the people, part of the clubs or membership things and all that, and goes to it. And so that one is probably one of the best ways, just because we're out there and we're working in that field. And then the third way is by far the best, is people that we've done deals with in the past. So if we bought your company and you're still want to, most of them do, we'll work with them to, because they typically know people just like themselves. So it's staying active in the industry, having people you've done deals with do it, and then just the inbound stuff.
What advice would you give to somebody, maybe an investor who's listening to this, who wants to figure out how they can invest in businesses like this, or maybe get into the game of evaluating businesses?
Well, there's different levels of investing, right? So if you're going to get into the big time, whatever the heck that means, you got to be an accredited investor, right? So in other words, you got to have a certain amount of net worth and all. And by the way, that's a legal term, and it means that you have a certain net worth and a certain amount of money and all that. So
You want me to rattle it off? I do it all the time for my
Oh, well,
investors.
I forget you're the pro, right?
So, to be an accredited investor, this is an IRS and an SEC designation. And what it simply means is that there are a couple of ways you can qualify. First of all, if you have $200,000 of income as a single individual for the past 2 years in a row with a reasonable expectation of the same in the third year, then you are accredited. Or if you have 300,000 as a married couple. The other way that you can be is through the net worth test, and that is if you have $1 million, excluding your primary residence of overall assets. The other ways are if you hold certain FINRA licenses. So most people fall into the first two
Yeah,
categorizations.
yeah. So what that's kind of necessary but not sufficient. It really
Hmm.
doesn't get you any other thing other than when you do get to something, they'll make you sign documents saying you're an accredited investor. But then if you're passive, you can find funds or groups sometimes through your bankers. Sometimes through people like yourself, you started this wonderful alternative investment club. So that's a very great way to do it. Typically, you can do well in because you're spreading the risk. Then your
Hmm.
third way that you're going to go do it is you're like, all right, I want in. How do I go get in? And what one way is who do you know? So if you're moving in that world and you're around it and you start talking to people, you will find opportunities. There's more folks out there than you can believe who are doing it. I have met with hundreds of people who are starting their own fund, starting their own investment, and they're looking for partners and all that. Now you have to do your diligence and decide what your risk tolerance is, because as you put that money in, you can lose that money. And most funds, if you get invited to do it, what they do is they'll say, okay, I'm just going to use a million. Why not? You pledge $1 million. You don't actually give them that $1 million. What happens is as the deals come in, they'll do a capital call for you and say, you're going to put your million or your 250,000 or whatever in. And so you don't actually get to say yes or no at that point. You just get the call and you have to send the check.
Hmm.
And you are in for the amount you commit. And then if something happens, let's say the businesses are not performing well, they need more capital, or they would need knock-on investments. Just maybe they're doing great and they want to buy more. You will generally get a first look to buy more. That would be more money you put in. If you don't put it in, which is typically never required, your percentage of ownership gets diluted, which can be not a happy occasion sometimes, right? So I don't know if that's too complex. I don't want to take us down
No, no,
bunny
no.
holes. Yeah,
The more the better. I think the majority of people that listen to this are actually engineers, so that could
yeah,
be the case. Um, Actually, I have a question for those who are, maybe they don't want to strike out on their own, and they might be afraid of, uh, being a full-time investor or even a part-time investor and making those decisions.
sure.
Would going and working for a PE company or through some other type of employment with larger, mid-range PE companies, is that a viable on-ramp into this business? And can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think it's the best ramp. Look,
Yeah.
it's so interesting. So I'll share a little short story. So, I've done this kind of stuff my whole life. And then I like retire. Well, I'm like, okay, I think I'm done, right? The pandemic was here. I moved to Florida. Right now I'm in Georgia because Florida's trying to get blown away with some hurricane. And I go to Florida and I think, all right, I've had some success. I kind of know what I'm doing. So I start thinking, well, maybe I'll just do this by myself. I'll just buy a couple of storage units or something. It turns out, I believe we all have certain skill sets, right? And if you're used to doing good at really certain things and you get a little lost in it. So joining with others, I believe, is the absolute way to go. Now, what you need is you don't need an audience. You need players on the field. So you're going to want to find someone like yourself, someone like me who knows how to do this piece, and maybe you've got that piece, and then someone else is going to have the other piece. So I know how to run them, I know how to get them together, buy them, and sell them. but I don't have the financial expertise of working with the bankers behind. Like I've never raised money from sovereign wealth funds, right? I don't. So that's something outside of my. I've seen it. I'm amazed by it, and I think, geez, I wish when I grow up I'll be one of those guys. It's funny, you're sitting in the room with them, and I look at them and I go, you guys are like godlike creatures with what you're able to do. They look at us the same way. They're like, man, you can take a company and do this. I wish I could do that. So you want to be with people who you admire and inspire all because they do things you can't do, right? So get yourself some partners. Be thoughtful about who you pick with it. From it,
just from
I'll
a
add.
super. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I just go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to give people a really concrete step, is there a group or organization you recommend people would go out and contact if they want to get started in this? Obviously, you mean you can talk about your own products, but let's do your own products and maybe one or two other recommendations as well.
Look, there's a ton of people out there. Some of them way better, and I hope they've forgotten more than I'll ever know. Right, so you should go with the one that is aligned with your values and what you want to do, and what
Yeah.
what you bring to the table with it. So you know, the going back to what you said earlier, the smartest thing you can do before you decide you're going to go and throw a lot is go work in this industry, right? So go work for a PE firm, go work for a consulting firm, go do that. You get to learn on someone else's dime, and you get to trade on their network. So when I started out, like I said, I didn't know anything. The way I learned it was I got a job and started doing the and doing it. I'd highly recommend. So if you I know you guys at one point were heavy into real estate. You want to learn real estate? Go work in real estate. Turns out you'll learn it really, really quickly. And so there are, and this was a couple of years ago, and I know the number is significantly expanded, but there was over 30,000 private equity firms out there. Everything from people like you or I, one man bands, all the way up to these massive companies. Depending on where your journey is, if you want to learn private equity, get in there. The second way, let's say you don't have the financial chops, right? That's not where you want to be. Go work for a firm owned by private equity. I have 10,000 employees and we're owned by private equity, right? You come work in our firm. If you get to a certain level, it's no longer just about doing that product. Like Intel, it's no longer just about making chips, right? It's also how do we position this stuff to like investors like us more and customers like us more and all that. Once you're at that level where you can see it, you will get involved in things that private investment will be. Now, here's the thing people don't think about. You want to learn it fast and you want to get it really close to it, go into one having trouble. Go into one. You think, why would you do that? If everything is good, they don't need you. If turmoil and chaos is opportunity. So if you can go into a company that's fundamentally strong, but is going through a rough patch, you get more responsibility and more access to the leaders and decision makers and the opportunities than you do one that's running along smoothly.
Oh, that's fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about your books or other things that you have going on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book we have out today is the 80/20 CEO. It's been a bestseller on Amazon for quite a while, which is I'm always amazed by. I also recognize it's a pretty low bar, right? So there's a bunch of books out there, but it's been a good one, and I'm amazed by how well it's done. It's targeted at really that leadership team that's thinking about going through this transition. It talks a little bit about me. It talks about taking command and control of a company in 100 days and into 5 management processes. The next book that I have coming out is called Earn the Right to Grow. And believe it or not, last week it was just picked up by Wiley. So Wiley Publishing, one
Oh,
of the big 5.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I hope thank you, because they're already saying, do you like your title? And I'm like, well, I kind of do like the title. So it'll be interesting to see. So I'll be learning like everyone else. And then the one coming after that one is The Rule of Three. Each one of these books are targeted at specific pieces. The first one is, this is kind of what 80/20 is about and how to get a hold of a company and turn it around. The Earn the Right to Grow is the energy and effort over a couple year period it takes to really get command of that business, right? So you do all the right stuff, but it takes a while, right? And some of the things we do, we have to wait for those seeds to flower, to be planted and flower and grow into something meaningful. The rule of three is about the three people you need, the three types of people you need to successfully run any organization. So yeah, so those are the books right now, and there's four more that are coming after those. So if we can hold it together, I think it'll be interesting.
All right. And then last question, what is your favorite sector for looking at private investment right now?
Well, it's interesting on the sector. So I think about it more from characteristics. So there's five key things I like to see in any investment, right? And everyone's got their own. So in no particular order, right? So I like it to be a business with a continuous revenue stream. So like I don't care for project businesses; they're fine, but I like businesses that are continuous revenue stream with a strong aftermarket, right? I like it to be mission critical. So in other words, if it breaks, they have to fix it. So it's not an optional thing for them to have. And there's so many things that go with that. The one right after that is severe service. So the first is they got to, if it breaks, they fix it. The second one means it's in a harsh environment, it wears out. So I don't want something that's going to last forever. I want them just like a razor blade. It gets wore out, they have to put a new one in. I mentioned already a strong continuous revenue. So that's parts and pieces that they have to come back and get. Fourth one is some kind of moat around the business, right? Something, either some type of protection from it. And the fifth one is I like it to represent less than 2% of the value of whatever it's going into. And why I like that is if you're selling a car, right? If you're General Motors and you're kind of do cost reducing, you're probably going to look at the engine or the tires or the metal. I like to be the guy selling the bolt in there because my bolt maybe only costs $5. If I raise that to 6, they maybe don't complain too much. If they get it for free, it doesn't change the value that this is $100,000 car, right? So those are the things I like to see: mission critical, severe service, strong reoccurring revenue, some way to protect it, and less than 2% of the value of whatever it's doing.
All right, Bill, how can the Revolution of Return listeners reach out to you?
So there's several ways. The easiest, just go right to my website. It's my name, billcanady.com. And you can find there on how to contact me, and I'd be thrilled to chat with anyone about these topics.
All right, Bill, thanks so much for being here on the show. And I'm looking forward to posting this and seeing people pump the numbers up on it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. This was fantastic. Really, really an honor.